What is up, everyone? My tier list is so big that you can see it from the moon. It's gigantic. And for that reason, I've done something special. I've split it up into many still big but smaller tier lists. And what I'm gonna do from here on out is I'm gonna use these little tier lists to place units accurately as I can. And then when they're all done, then I'll merge them all together into one big tier list. Because currently, when I'm like putting a unit on this giant thing here, it's becoming pretty hard to reference exactly where they should go, especially because not every unit is in the right place yet. That's probably an understatement. And I find I'm not doing cross-game comparisons too much. It kind of just ends up being on a whim a little bit. And I tend to just look for units from the same game, see where they are at, and just place them somewhere in that tier where it feels right. I do some cross-game comparisons, but honestly almost every single comparison between like two units from different games is like apples to oranges to the max. That tends not to go so well. I could make like an entire video discussing just the pros of Zs versus the pros and cons of Glade. Well, the cons of Zs as well, of course. He sure has plenty. And if I had to analyze like every single comparison I had to do here, these videos would be like 6 hours long. I was like, you know what, this is probably getting too lengthy. So let me just make it easier on everyone. I split up the tier list into the like per game tier list, and then later on I'm gonna merge them together into one big tier list. And that's gonna make everything a lot more easy to see. So let me walk you through what I've got, alright? So let me try this again. So this is the one for FE3 characters so far. FE4, FE5, FE6, FE7, FE8, FE9, FE10, Shadow Dragon, New Mystery, Awakening, Fates. This is Conquest basically. This is the Birthright units. I don't really have one for Revelation. I usually just take the average of units from Birthright and Revelation if it's a Birthright character, and same goes for Conquest. Because they're pretty hard to rank otherwise, I don't have a separate entry for them for Revelation, so this is kind of the way it ends up being. And then we got Echoes, and then we have 3 houses. As you can see, some games are more popular than others. I have requested that people stop submitting Birthright characters until I finish playing the game. Same for Awakening. I want to replay that game first before I continue to tier characters, but I have some anyway for now. And in the same vein, speaking of requests, I have put these tier list links on Twitter. So if you check my Twitter or my Patreon, you can see where you can see how you can set up these tier lists on your own, so you can mess around with it and maybe try to make a more accurate list than mine. Because right now mine are a little bit of a mess because of how long we've been doing these. So with that out of the way, as promised, today we get to last batch of the month, August I do believe. And after that I'm going to open the submissions for this month, September. They're going to be opened until October. If you're wondering what I mean by submissions, of course this is the big tier list project. I'm going to tier every single Fire Emblem character. Eventually, everyone is going to be on there at some point or another, but my Patreons decide who goes first. So if you support me on Patreon, you get to submit a character for every month that you are a Patreon. And if you're a higher tier, you get to submit more details on the Patreon in the link in the description below, There we go. So now let's get to Awakening characters, which should be not this one, there we go. As you can see, it's not a whole lot on here. We have just the Robins in S+ tier. I think Robins are probably the best unit in all of Fire Emblem. Nothing has really changed my opinion on that. I had Muriel put into like B- a long time ago. I'm pretty sure she should be lower. I'm kind of trying to do it based on hard mode more than Lunatic, which means she could probably do like Vengeance memes, but I still feel like she should move down to like C tier. Like this is probably gonna change a little bit more depending on how I go about things, but we'll see what I do when I'm like back to replaying Awakening. But for now, well, first of all, I can't even see these in my thing. I need to like scroll down more, but that won't let me. Let me fix that real quick. Okay, so with the way my layout is right now, I can't really get to the top or the bottom, but alright, whatever, we'll just roll with it. So we have Anna from Awakening. Let me get my list of requests out here so I can sum up who I've got. Anna from Awakening, submitted by Gil Farce. Donald was submitted by Lucas Mills. And Severa was submitted by Jean. And Marie-Louis requested Cherche. I will never learn how to pronounce that. They said they thought Cherche was submitted by someone else. So they submitted Jerome instead, but I was like, I can't actually find Church anywhere in my records, so I'm just going to do Church for now. Probably better off that way because I've never used Jerome in my life, so you wouldn't really get a very accurate opinion. So let's get started. So Anna, paralog unit, as far as I remember, you have to complete multiple paralogs to recruit her. But once you do get her, she seems pretty good. Pre-promoted rogue with some pretty good skills. I'm pretty sure she starts with acrobatics. I'm going to double check that real quick. I remember kind of liking that. I like her staff utility in general, and I believe she has access to an easy reclass to Sage for more rescue range. I remember there was like an Awakening LTC, I think, by Espinoza that made use of her. I think it was the 0% growth LTC that was like abandoned for a long time but finally finished. I thought that was pretty good. Yes, there we go. C swords, only D staffs, but at rescue is like E rank anyways. It's not a big issue. She could probably use good staffs by the time you really want her to. Which is movement +1 and luck touch at base. And I'm pretty sure that class gets like some good skills. Okay, yeah. So she has a lucky 7 at level 5 and an acrobat at level 15. An acrobat is basically acrobatics. I think that's what it's called in different games, where you can traverse any terrain that you could normally cross, but for like one movement point. You can move across like mountains and rivers really quickly. I remember something like that was pretty cool. I don't think I've used Anna full time in my playthrough. I think I always end up using her for a little bit and kind of enjoying that. I remember her being like really fast and dodgy and generally pretty good. And the staff utility seems really nice, so I feel like she's a good candidate for A- or B+. I don't think she's as great as early units that are like pretty good. I feel like I'm kind of tempted to give units like Crom and Frederick a little more credit than that because of their availability lead, but I don't think you can get her particularly late, so I might be underrating her a little bit. I'm going to put her in A- for now. She's pretty good to me in Awakening. Not the game I'm the most familiar with, I will admit that right away, but that's what I think so far. She's pretty alright, she's pretty cool. Next we have Donald from same game. I'll need one paralog to get him. And I remember I tried using Donald on my first playthrough, but I think I just straight up died the first time I tried it because the guy is so weak. I'm actually playing Birthright right now. I'm trying to use the villager from that game, Mozu, and it's actually like the most fun of the game that I've had. Like with like Birthright, everything else is kind of blah, but using Mozu is pretty fun. And I remember the times I did manage to train Donald, I actually really enjoyed myself. I remember liking his like strength and HP the most by far, but I believe his growth are just generally good, of course. At least the main issue with Donald is like, if you're playing normal or hard, then almost anyone can become proficient at combat and good enough to kill like enemies time and time again, especially with how broken pair up is and the kind of broken skill combos you can do. So having better long-term prospects than other units is not that outstanding, and instead what makes a unit good is being good at base level or giving good pair bonuses or being available early. I believe that's generally the way that Awakening meta goes. So someone like Donald, who starts off a lot worse and then ends up performing relatively the same. Sure, stats are higher, like the numbers are bigger, but that usually means they're more overkill. But generally you'd rather have that strength early on than later on. I remember if you don't give this guy like a really good pair up like Frederick or maybe Sumia, he just straight up dies. I remember like even getting him to join you was kind of annoying because you have to give him an entire level in his joining chapter. I think a lot of people just gum down an archer. Like they trap an archer and just have him like wail away at it like turn after turn just to make it easier on themselves. But it's possible to do it in other ways too. Really enjoyable unit to use, but I don't think it's feasible to put him anywhere near the top. I'm not sure about whether he's E or F tier, but he's pretty bad. Pop memes are always good though. You can't go without pop memes. Not when you're watching a Dutch YouTuber. So, I mean, I don't think there's a worse unit in Awakening. If there's a worse unit in Awakening, feel free to tell me, but I don't think there is one. So I think he belongs in F overall. Next we have Severa. Now, this is a child unit, and I've actually made some Awakening pairings, but I don't think I've ever done one where I recruited and used Severa. I might have like obtained her through pairing her mom. I'm pretty sure her mom is Cordelia, but I don't think I've ever used her full time. I know there's some pretty good options for her. I know like giving her soul, for example, can be pretty good. I think you do that with like Hero Fake or something. So those options are pretty good, but generally I just don't know what to do with kids I've never used. I know Awakening kids are kind of nice because you just recruit them at level 10, so you can instantly reclass them with a second seal to anything you want. Not the second seal, in that game they're called something different, but they're pretty good. Are they called second? Yeah, second seal is what they're called, I think. See, I really need to replay Awakening sometimes, because I remember that game is like, the early game is then really fun, and then it gets kind of draggy in the mid to late game. It kind of becomes Ambush City and stuff. But I just haven't played it a long time, and I felt that like even if if it has been a long time since I've played a game, I'm gonna enjoy it regardless of how good it is. And the last time I played Fates, I actually got like a couple of kids and like played a bunch of new paralogs. That's kind of fun to just experience new stuff in Fire Emblem. Sometimes playing the same old stuff gets very boring. But I don't really have a lot to say about Sephra because I never really used her. But from what I've seen in theory, I think she's like fine in like D or C tier. Like she seems like as useful as a kit might be. I'm kind of rating her based on hard mode, so that's kind of the metric I'm going for. But I can't say that I know for sure how good she is. Let me just check what classes are available to her, because that's probably what kind of makes or breaks her. But it's like, sure she can get Gale Force, but Gale Force, as far as I can tell, is pretty overrated when it comes to like passing it down to kids. Because you gotta be like really over level to get Gale Force in the first place. Usually, like, I feel like Robin only gets it like very late in the game, so how are you supposed to get Gale Force on Sephiroth without grinding? That seems impossible. I'd rather rate units without grinding. What class sets does Sephiroth have? Okay, so Mercenary, so she can get Soul either way, but you can get it quickly if you want it. Pegasus Knight, so she can get Gale Force by herself if you want to. That seems like a pretty good class set to me. So if you're willing to like customize a character a little bit, then probably she's good. I don't know if you can do this like feasibly in a normal playthrough though, like if you're just not grinding. So that, I guess, is what kind of determines how good she is in the long term. Because, for example, I trained Ophelia in my Fates playthrough, and I found that like without actually grinding, but just playing chapters, paralogs and stuff, you could feasibly get her all the skills she needed without feeding her like too much stuff, without like really going out of your way to do stupid stuff. The only stupid thing I did is give her life and death from Master of Arms, but I did that in a very inefficient way. So if you know what you're doing, you can probably do a better job. So I feel like my opinion on Sephiroth kind of depends on like how easy it is to do that with people like Sephiroth. But again, Awakening meta stuff, not something I'm super familiar with. Church, my personal first impression of Church was just her joining in a chapter that's like filled to the brim with enemies she can be effective against, like Armor Knights and Paladins and Cavaliers and stuff. And she just straight up joined with a hammer. It's like, alright, I can one-shot these guys, and that's pretty cool. And she has a really good base class, of course, with like Wyvern. I know more people have access to Wyvern classes in a game like Awakening. You just like reclass other people into it, like Pan, I guess is what we call her. She has access to that class too, so it's not like a V6 where it's like, alright, you're a Wyvern, good unit. It's not exactly like that. But still a very good class to be in. I remember I actually used her on my first playthrough ever, which wasn't hard, and I made her a Griffin Rider, which I'm not sure if it's the efficient choice or not. I remember kind of liking the skills that I got from that. I don't know if I actually remember what it was. What's this Griffin Rider get? Deliverer, movement +2 and parried up. That's a really good skill, actually. I feel like that's a really good skill for like clearing chapters fast and stuff. And on Lancebreaker, that seems pretty good too. Like +50 hit and avoid against a pretty common enemy type. It's not like it's FE7 where lances are like the most common weapon type, but it seems useful. But it's only like level 15 onwards, so I don't know how much worth it is. Wyvern Lord gets Quick Burn, which I've never felt like was super great, but I guess it can increase reliability a little bit. And then Swordbreaker, which I guess is about as useful as Lancebreaker is. So yeah, pretty good skills overall, from what I can tell from my novice expectations. I feel like Church just seems like she should be under-leveled because her base level is like not super impressive. But I remember her stats holding up fine, and I'm pretty sure you can get her to perform adequately with the right pair up. You might have to give her like a good pair up, like someone like Frederick, who's like really good for pairing up at that point, or like a really fast person to make sure that she doubles, because I'm not sure if she doubles reliably, but I think with effective weapons she can get one of KOs anyway. So I feel like it's fair to put her in B+ or A- at the very least. I'm not sure if she's like, I'm pretty sure she joins a fair amount earlier than Anna. But I like her class better overall. But Anna's like additional utility, like rescue utility and thief utility and stuff. So I feel like it's fair to put Anna here. Plus Anna has like still has good mobility once you get Acrobat, but before that it's like not as good, not nearly as good. So maybe it should be more like this. I don't know. I'll put them in the same A1 for now. No, I'm still gonna go with my initial gut here. Not sure though, not sure. Alright, next up we have some Fates characters. This is Conquest, that one we're doing first. So we have Gunter, submitted by Great Dane. The one and only Odin Dark was submitted by Yidis. Ryoma was submitted by Lazy Bison. He's on the Birthright one over here. We have Kaze submitted by Corey, and Corey also submitted Arthur, so thank you very much. And then Effie was submitted by Effie was submitted by Heston. So Gunter, I've quote-unquote used in my first playthrough a little bit, early on just as like Jagan purposes, and later on as like a pair-up bot. I didn't end up using him on recent Lunatic run at all beyond like the prologue, because by the time I got him I didn't really have a unit slot for him. There was like a ton of people I wanted to deploy. I was leaving off regular units like Niles a lot, so there's no way I had room for Gunter. I only know Gunter as a good pair-up bot. I believe the Great Knight gives like excellent pair-up bonuses. I also used him for that purpose a lot in Revelation. I don't think I undeployed him until I like paired up Jacob with Khorne a lot. And at that point, that became kind of like my mainstay pairing, to just kill everything with Khorne. But I don't really have used Gunter as a unit that much. He's mostly been a stat backpack for most of the middle game. But I know he can be decent with like just a good class basis. I'm pretty sure he has access to Wyvern Lord at the very least, through like reclassing. Which of course gives him access to like rally defense and numerous other classes. I'm actually going to check real quick what options he has. Yeah, okay, so he has access to the lines of Cavalier, Mercenary, and Wyvern Rider, which is pretty cool. I mean, of course, he's a Great Knight, so you expect him to be able to use the Cavalier class line. So if you wanted to, you could get him like, I don't know, Shelter and Elbow Room, Defender, I guess, from Paladin. Those are all like pretty good skills. You don't even need to keep that class, but I like it for a bit. But once terrain becomes more common, you can just make him more Wyvern Rider. So stat-wise, he's pretty good. But of course, his growths are pretty garble as far as I remember. Yeah, Gunter has absolute garbage growth, so he's relying on his bases mostly. I remember his bases are super good at first because, you know, promoting and stuff. But I remember when he rejoins, he's good for like the chapter he's in for like helping out, because you don't really have many other characters available at that point. It's just like Gunter, Khorne, and Azura, and that's basically it, I remember. And the same goes for like when he's available early on Revelation, but after that it's like So it's kind of like an FA10 unit that kind of goes up and down in utility a lot, and it's pretty hard to place him. So for now, I'm tempted to put him like, if I had to average out his Conquest and Revelation utility and average out how good he is early on with how okay he is early on, I suppose he's like a B- character. He seems like, when you phrase it like that, it seems pretty good, but I don't think he's like an optimal character to deploy for like the whole game, at least. So these characters are like very hard to weigh for me. And I'm not sure if he's actually worse than Baruka overall. I feel like Baruka was pretty good long term, but I will admit I didn't really use her much in the end game of my Lunatic run, because she didn't seem like one of the better units. But then again, I was like really focused on using units like Odin Dark and Ophelia Dusk and stuff like that. Odin Dark is probably the unit I've done the biggest 180 on like all of Fates, if not all of Fire Emblem. I've never ended up liking a character more after being so whatever on him. I think in my first playthrough, I enjoyed Odin's voice lines, but I never really was intended to use him. I feel like a lot of people just convinced me that he was bad, and that was pretty like common knowledge. Just like, all right, the guy's kind of slow, he doesn't really double anything, and it's not super bulky or anything, so it's kind of mediocre. And then Zoran made a bunch of videos about how good Odin Dark is and how good Ophelia is and what they can do. Some kind of demonstration videos. They're really fun. I'll try to put his name on screen somewhere, because I think I forgot last time. But at this point, if you've watched my Lunatic streams at all, you probably know who I'm talking about. He was regularly watching and giving tips too. Super shout out to Zoran. I'm not sure I'm ready for putting Odin Dark all the way up in S+ or S- tier yet, but I've definitely like changed my opinion on him quite a bit. When I made my Mage Boy tier list, I put him in like E or D tier or something like that. Nowadays, on average, I would say he's at least like a B tier unit or something. But it feels weird. It feels weird to put him all the way up here, but the fact that Odin can like Nosferatu tank with, you know, pretty average resource management, honestly, like sure, you need to give him a bunch of pair-ups, or you need to give him like a good pair-up and like a good set of tonics, but in exchange, he can take on a huge amount of the map that very few other units can replicate. Like, Camilla can kind of do what he does, I guess, but other than that, I don't kind of think of many units that can do what he does. I guess Silas with the right build. So, yeah, Odin Dank is pretty goddamn good, I guess. Later on, I felt like only really made use of him like early on, like up to chapter 14, 15 roughly. Once I got Ophelia, which I think was like around chapter 17, and that's when I unlocked her paralog and like opened it, I think. I mostly just focused on Ophelia. Odin was kind of like her pair-up bot, because they were both sorcerers, and the +5 or 6 magic that she got from pairing up with him was too good to pass up. And I kind of rarely made use of Odin Dark himself after that, which is regrettable, but at least we got to hear his support quote all stream long. I even like changed my donation sounds to sound like him, so I love Odin Dark personally, but I don't know exactly where to put him. He's a very weird unit. I don't want to go off of like a single personal opinion of him, as correct as it might be, but I'll give him a tentative B+ for now. Definitely a huge improvement over where he used to be, but I'm not sure if I can like warrant putting him higher just based off like hearsay basically, because I didn't use him optimally, I didn't use him well. I just sorted it what I felt was fun, and I took some risk with him that I maybe shouldn't have. I know we can perform well late game. I know we can do the thing that Ophelia is known for doing, where she just OKOs a bunch of ninjas in the Ryoma chapter. I know Odin can do that too, but it just takes a bunch of spirit dusts. I don't think it's fair to give all those to him, but at the same time, there's not many other candidates for it, so maybe it's sort of fair. It feels like the thing with Jill and Radiant Dawn, where you give Jill like an angelic robe and an energy drop and a Deku Shield, because really she's the best user of them, but it still should have some sort of opportunity cost, I think. Next we have Kaze. Now Kaze is in Birthright and in Conquest and in Revelation, so it's pretty tough to give him a proper rating. I put him on the Conquest list because I've only fully played Conquest, and I played Revelation, but I didn't use him all the time. At some point I benched him, I don't remember exactly when. I think I used him a bit on my first playthrough. I don't remember if it was on my final squad or anything, but I remember thinking that Master Ninjas weren't really that amazing as everyone was telling me to be. But that's before I learned about all the little tricks you can do with Kaze. Particularly, there's like two things about Kaze that I didn't realize before that I realize now. One of them is how fast he increases his guard gauge compared to other units. A lot of units either don't have 1 to range or they don't double attack, so their guard gauge usually fills up by less because they don't counterattack 2 range enemies or 1 range enemies for archers, I guess. And a lot of them don't double. Kaze does both, so he blocks like every other attack basically. Like if someone attacks him, that's like 2 shields, and if he counterattacks twice, that's 2 more. And then he's just 2 more attacks away from getting a shield gauge, and that's quite a lot. And that doesn't take into account things like his insane res for being good against mages. I've never really seen a more dedicated mage killer than the ninja class in Fate. It's really quite astonishing how effective they are just dealing with a bunch of mages. It's pretty impressive. And he's pretty solid at dealing with Pegasus Knights as well because of the Hunter's Knife. That's the other thing I didn't really know, is like in the Honoka chapter or the Fuga Winch chapter, his ability to just take care of a huge group of Pegasus Knights is so good. Like he doesn't OKO, but he 1-rounds them, which is probably even better when you have the shield gauge and everything. And that makes him so much more effective. And his speed is just absolutely overkill. I only used him as a ninja into Master Ninja. I didn't like dip into other classes like Mechanist, but I heard that Mechanist Kaze can also be pretty nice, and I can see that because I believe it has higher strength, and you can get Replicate, which has some really cool implications, like having an extra unit to pair up with, or give pair up bonuses with, or debuff people with. Nice. Like before this, I used to think Kaze was just kind of like good early on because he could chip people, like he does some damage and he poison strikes and he debuffs them so everyone else can finish off. But as the enemy density increases, such units seem like much less useful because you need to kill enemies outright, preferably, or you get overwhelmed. Like you are outnumbered like 4-1 in most cases, and if the enemy is too high, then having a unit that can chip enemies down is kind of useless. But Kaze proved useful at just killing everything, and if he does leave something alive, they're very easy to kill still because of all these things that I just mentioned, like the debuffs, and he counters everything. So I would say Kaze is at the very least A- and maybe even A+. In the context of like Conquest, Xander's up here. You can't really see him right now. Well, I guess you can. There you go. I feel like Xander should be 2 tiers above Kaze. I think there's like a pretty big gap between them. Kind of tempted to just move Xander up to S+ right now because of how much he trivialized Conquest Lunatic. But I feel like I already changed his position before based on that. But goddamn, Xander is... I want to say Xander's the best unit in Conquest personally, besides maybe like Korn and maybe Camilla. But honestly, I think he has an argument against both because just of how ridiculous he is. So I think I feel more like right now with this. I get that Xander's like less availability though, so I'm not completely sure about this one. But goddamn, Xander's defense and multi-range is even more insane than Kaze's. So yeah, there you go. Kaze's defense is actually very good. I've had him die before. But yeah, Kaze was a pretty clutch unit for me. I'm very glad to have used him. And in Birthright, I believe he should be equally good in Birthright. There's no way this kind of unit is not good in Birthright. Revelation, I guess I used him like for early Garium, not after that. But again, I've seen a reason why I wouldn't be equally good there. So I guess this is like one of the most consistent units in like all of Fates. Not as good as Conquest Saizo though. By the way, does anyone know why Saizo is not in my unit list? I don't see him in Conquest unit list. Arthur is another unit I mostly use as a pair-up bot rather than someone I used full time, but I know he can be effective. I remember his biggest weaknesses being, you know, low luck and shaky hit rate, but his attack power seems pretty good, and I mostly used to pair him with Effie actually and make her stronger. But I think sometimes when I watch like Zoran videos, I feel like a lot of people just use certain units as pair-up bots and nothing else, when they should be used as like pair-up bots when it's convenient, but they should also be used as, you know, standalone units that attack every now and then, because that can get you some good results as well. Depends on the situation, depends on whether you actually want to use him long term or not. If you're not planning to use Arthur long time, I see no reason why you would train him, of course. But sometimes I think you just, if you pair up all your units, you're kind of halving your army's potential. I feel like you really want to make use of dual strikes when you can, and that is one of the things I'm going to get better at when I'm replaying Fates at some point. Maybe not during this Birthright playthrough that I'm doing, but during like a future like Conquest Lunatic playthrough or something, because I feel like you can really max out your potential there, and Arthur kind of showcases that. I don't know a whole lot about Arthur as a unit. From what I can tell, just really high attack, and you kind of want to give him a goddess icon or get rid of Gamble or something. Basically make him less likely to get hit, because really blaming RNG is a pitfall, and if you can maximize your odds, you should. But I don't really know a lot about Arthur as a Conquest unit. I just know he's like a really good pair-up bot. So as a pair-up bot, yeah, Berserker bonuses are super good, or even fighter bonuses are super good. But I'm sure the early availability and the access to like quick marriage with someone like Effie or someone else is worth. And Percy was a pretty serviceable unit for me too. I actually ended up getting Percy, and I was much happier with him on my second playthrough than my first playthrough. So it's probably worth at least getting someone to support him, but that doesn't really mean that Arthur's any good. Any credit that I want to give to Percy, I will give to Percy. I'm not going to give Arthur credit for having a good son. So for now, I'm going to put him in like C or B minus, I think, but I honestly don't really know much about Arthur. I do usually request that people submit characters that I'm actually familiar with, and you know, that's going to show in like I don't know, Echoes or Three Houses. Arthur, not a very good showcase of that. Effie I did use basically full time for almost the entire game, from when she joined, roughly until like Ophelia joined, and I didn't really have this unit slots to use everyone I wanted to use, and Effie kind of became a bit of a victim to that. But I remember Effie being super clutch in the early chapters. I really love her personal skill, where she just does a ton of extra damage just by having more strength than them. So what I would do is I would stack strength on Effie with like an Arthur pair up and tonics and then a meal, and be like, alright, I can one-shot stuff now. And that was super, super good, super nice to have. There are enemies that are effective against Effie, especially if you make a great knight like I did, but most of the time they're not there, and when they're not there, her defense is super clutch. I did find that Conquest's formations are much better at dealing with Effie than formations in like FE7 are with dealing with Osmond, for example. There's usually a lot more magic mixed in, or like Reaver weapons, or other weapons that can kind of catch you off guard and make her high defense a lot less reliable, and sometimes that was like really annoying. Something dumb like an enemy pairing up with like an armor slayer or something and getting dual strikes on her could be pretty annoying, but most of the time she was paired up with Arthur, so that wouldn't really be an issue. But yeah, I remember particularly using her a lot in like chapter 13, the chapter that has like Scarlet and what's his face, Takumi as like enemies. The chapter where my Iron run ended basically. She was pretty nice there for just having a very bulky unit that could deal a ton of damage and occasionally one-shotting stuff. Not always, but quite often. And Effie seems like a pretty good unit. I've never liked Armor Knights much, but I feel like in Fates it's okay to be one, because pair up is such a powerful option for getting mobility. Like, it's basically like everyone has a rescue command. No one has Kanto, but almost everyone is able to provide her with some mobility. So if you're smart, you plan your moves out, you can work around her low move a lot better than you can in like the GBA game, for example. So I want to put her in B+ as well. I don't know if she's better than Odin or not. I've heard from, you know, a source that you can like pair her with Mozu as like a friendship seal, and you can get a quick draw on her, which seems pretty good to me. Just stack more damage modifiers on her so she can one-shot, because late game I felt like it was pretty hard to reach the thresholds that she needs to get one-shots. But in the early game I thought it was pretty easy, at least to get like solid chip in with Effie. At the very least I felt like that was something she could do. I really liked her using her as a as a buff unit. One thing that does hurt her too is like poison strikes on enemies and like steel defense. That also really hurts. I really hated dealing with that all the time, because if she gets the defense seal and she gets doubled, she's dead. I found it very annoying in like chapter 9, I think it was, the Haitaka chapter. God, I hated that so much. But if you're careful with that kind of thing, or you're able to one-shot those enemies before they can seal your defense, then you're golden. Next, I only have one unit for Birthright, and that's Ryoma. I haven't finished Birthright. Actually, I haven't even gotten to the unit, to the part where we get Ryoma yet. I'm in the ninja chapter, the Ninja Force chapter right now, as I'm recording this. And kind of gross, not gonna lie. But I know I can solidly put Ryoma like all the way up in S+. You can't see it yet. I really hate having to do this. I should have a way to deal with this somehow. There we go. There's the S+ tier for you. Because as far as I know, Ryoma and Birthright is the most brainless unit ever invented. Like, Rajinto, one to range, any doubles, any kills, and he has Astra. Like, I used him in Revelation. I know what he can do. I just haven't seen it in the context of Birthright yet. But at the very least, he has to be like quite a bit worse in Revelation, or quite a bit worse in Birthright compared to Revelation to be not S+ tier. This is stupid. This should not be a unit, but it is a unit, and it's busted ass stuff. Bushido seems like a pretty good personal skill as well, but like Astra getting you extra guard gauges alone is like super hilarious to me. Like, just sure, I'll half my damage to just get more guard gauges, and that way I'm even more tanky than I should be. And I believe the Rajinto like even makes you a little bit more tanky, and just has good might. And like unconditional one to range is so good in Fates. I can't believe they gave it to Royals like Xander and Ryoma and just had him like bust out like that. Ryoma is stupid. Ryoma should not be a thing. I'm not gonna lie, I love the fact that I had him in Revelation, because it made the game so much less painful to play. Like, imagine I didn't have him, I'd spend even longer having to play that game. He made it quicker. And I imagine, I don't want to hate on Birthright too much yet, because I've only seen like a third of it max. But so far, it has not been very inspiring. So being able to go past the chapters quickly with Ryoma seems like something I would want to do. I know he doesn't have the best availability in the game, or the best mobility in the game, but that kind of combat performance in a game where combat performance is, from what I can tell, it's not like easy to get so good as Ryoma is. Like, I know who else is going to be as good. Like, maybe Kaze can come close, or like some other kind of Master Ninja, because one to range with that capacity seems pretty hard to come by. Maybe there's some kind of broken skill combo I can do with one of the magical units, but from what I can tell, one to range is pretty rare. Usually not as strong as Ryoma's is. But yeah, I know what else you want me to say about Ryoma. I haven't used him yet in Birthright. I have used him in Revelation. He's super broken, super strong. Cool. Easiest Birthright submission ever. I don't know why he is here though. I don't know why he's here. Next up, I have some Echoes units for you, and I have, let's see, we have Tobin submitted by 420 Cheek Slurper, the Goraz submitted Gray and Claire, Brisinger submitted Tatiana, and then Mentos submitted Clive, so thank you very much. I've used all these units to some extent, and I gotta say, I like them all. I like them all. None of them are going to be bad. The villagers are a little tough to tier because I feel like a lot of their performance depends on what you make of them. So for me, for example, Tobin right now is kind of, he's useful, but he's not super great because he's a sage. But if I made him a mercenary, for example, he would probably be my MVP, or at least one of my best units right now. Gray, in my current playthrough, is my mercenary. And if I made him an archer, he'd probably be super great as well. But if I made him a mage, he was probably crap. Or like a cavalier, he'd probably be crap. So it's kind of tough to rate them based on that alone. I think it's optimal to make Tobin a mage, or maybe an archer. And I think it's optimal to make him a mercenary, because I think without mercenary class, Gray doesn't have too much going for him, or like maybe archer, I guess. Because I think without those classes, he doesn't really have the speed to contribute. But archer circumvents it through Hunter's Volley on the Kribbo, and mercenary circumvents it by just having really good speed. This really good speed base and growth to kind of fix that. If you make Gray a mercenary, I think there's no question he's at the very least an A+ kind of unit, maybe even, probably not S-. I don't know if we should take into account like worse promotions. I'm not like, take for example, like some kind of Sacred Stones promotion, like take Naomi for example, Sacred Stones. I'm not gonna rate her based off the fact that she can become a sniper, because that is just an inferior option compared to Ranger. So I'm just gonna assume she's being made a Ranger because it's a good promotion. But with the villagers, it's not infinitely inferior to pick another class, even if it's not his best class. Like, I think his best performance is a mercenary, but at the same time, other units sometimes want to be a mercenary too. And if you make 2 villagers a mercenary, then only one of them can use the lightning sword and the other one is kind of like just sitting around doing nothing. So you should only make one of them a mercenary, and it's kind of unfair to assume it's always going to be Grey, even though that is probably part of the best configuration. So that makes it super hard to weigh where they should go. For now, I think it's fair to put Grey up here with the other Dread Fighters from Echoes. He also is good as an archer, as far as I know, so that he's not reliant on that mercenary class. But it does make him like the best he can possibly. I'm going to put him ahead of Kamui. Do note that Alm right now is an A+, which I think is a fair rating for him. I've seen the comments about why he should be S. I don't agree with them. I think particularly the Royal Sword is still particularly a bit overrated. It's a very expensive to forge. I don't think it's fair to put Alm up here. Like, I have no one in S- right now, and I have only the Pegasus Knight in S+ right now. I don't think Alm belongs with them. I think it's fair to have him in A+ right now. But I think it's alright to have Grey up here with the rest of them. I could see Kamui moving down a little bit more. I kind of want to move Lucas down right now, actually, because I feel like in part 4 especially, he hasn't been as good as he has been in Acts 1 through 3. And I don't think he's going to be as good in Act 5 as well. So I think it's fair to bump him down a little bit. He's very reliant on Warp and Rescue to get anywhere right now. And the fact that he doesn't double compared to others, like, it's just much more effective to use other people for combat than it is to use Lucas. But that doesn't mean I'm not using him at all anymore. I'm just like kind of leaving him out every now and then. Tobin, same story as Grey for the most part. What I like about Tobin is that his magical spell list is just very simple but very effective, like just getting Excalibur, and I believe level 6 is super nice, but it takes forever to promote him to Sage because Gaga just never liked the magical units in that game, I guess, or just wanted them to promote late. So they made the promotion level super high, and even as a Sage, I just never found the Sages super useful. There are spaces where they are, especially when Armor Knights appear and you want to avoid a counter and do like a lot of damage to them. But for the most part, I just don't find them very useful. The low mobility is super annoying as well. Like, just being stuck at 4 moves sucks. But Tobin is not a Sage. He's just a villager that can also become a mercenary, just like Grey, or become an archer and get Hunter's Volley, just like I'm doing with Cliff. Become a Bow Knight with 5 range. All these are good options for him. And what he does is kind of dependent on what you want to do with the other villagers. So with those options, I can't not put him in A+. I don't know if he should be higher or worse than Grey. I'm putting him in the same tier at least. I feel like Tobin is more versatile because I don't think you ever want to make Grey a mage, whereas Tobin can probably make a good mercenary or archer or mage at least. Like, if you make Tobin a mage and Grey something else, you're gonna be fine. But if you do the reverse, you're kind of worse off, I feel like. So I'm gonna do it like that for now. Then there's Claire. I think I made a Pegasus Knight tier list a while ago. I think I put Claire in like C or D tier back then. I wasn't very impressed. I'm actually using Claire a fair bit when I can right now. Even though I'm in Act 4, she's very underleveled, I find her sometimes useful to kill witches with. I just treat her like a good lance. I have a couple lying around, and I have like a couple forged steel lance. And with those, she has sufficient attack to hit KO, and she can double witches, which is pretty nice. And she can do some damage against Arcanists as well, but she's not as good against those. They have a bit more bulk, and generally Claire's going to die in 2 hits of combat. But I was surprised at how good an underleveled Claire takes hits sometimes. So if I actually used her, she might have been like a little bit better. So maybe she's better than she shows, but I still think her mobility hasn't been very useful for the most part. Like, Claire can get to places quicker than most units, but she can't really handle things on her own. So she needs the company of other people anyway. And a lot of enemy types she's also like damn ineffective against. And this is not like Shadow Dragon where I could just trade the Rider's Bane to other people. It's not like you have like a whole squad of Cavaliers just neatly lined up for you to kill with the Rider's Bane most of the time. It happens, but a lot of the time you rather just throw in Clive with the Rider's Bane and have him finish a bunch of them on enemy phase. And it's not like player phase based game like Shadow Dragon where you just like, alright, trade it from Jagan to Sita, from Sita to Harden, from Harden to Abel and stuff. So I don't think it's kind of fair to just say, alright, she can use the Rider's Bane in Act 3, she's actually good. But I'm fine with bumping her up a little bit at the very least. I'm not sure exactly where she should go. I don't think she's high enough for like B tier. I don't think there's like enough utility for her as a flyer. Like, she can open doors and sometimes fly through corridors, but I just think she's too fragile. And the bow weakness, it really does still hurt, I think, in maps where enemies actually have weapons and where enemies have like range. Because enemies in Act 3 and Act 4, when they have bows, they have so much range that really prohibits where she can go safely. and Claire doesn't have the offense to just take them out outright and remove the only threat. So I'm gonna stick her in like C tier for now. Ahead of, like, I think it's fair to put like ahead of Bowie and May, who I did not end up switching around apparently, so I'm just gonna do that right now. For reasons stated in my last video. They need like roughly the same XP to level up apparently. I think, I don't know, I might just have to switch them around until the end of time, so every side is happy. But yeah, we'll put it like on here for now. I think that's alright. Tatiana, I put Tatiana in like my top 8 like most fun units to use, like best worst units. What was it called again? Like my favorite bat units to use, and I did that because I used her in Gaiden. I didn't actually use her in my Echoes playthrough, I think, or not extensively enough, I think. In this Blitzkrieg run that I'm doing right now, I did a bit of a fuck up with Tatiana. I should have saved the Sylvan Shrine. The shrine is like near New Baba's abode. Might not be the Sylvan Shrine, but I think it is. I should have saved that for after I recruited her, and I could use the encounters there to train Tatiana a bit. Now I'm dealing with like a somewhat underleveled Tatiana. I got Warp like near the end of Act 4, or Fortify at the end of Act 4. I don't know if I'm ever going to get Warp at this rate, and I kind of wish I got Warp for the final chapter. I don't know if I'm going to make it there, so I don't know for sure if I'm going to be rating her as accurately as I should, because I think if she got the couple levels and maybe like an XP fountain, then she would probably be able to warp me quicker, and warp is like super useful. Without warp, she has physic at base, which I still find like super useful. Like people are losing HP all the time. If it's not due to enemies, it's just losing like combat arts, like spamming Hunter's Volley, or I don't know, double line for like All I Care, or just using magic cost HP as well. So there's always something to heal for her, even if you're not getting hit, but most of the time you are getting hit by enemies at some point. So you want to heal people, and being able to use it as a safe distance is super nice, because these healers are just so fragile in this game, and enemies will always have a chance to kill them sometimes. She can use Seraphim to kill monsters. She can do a little bit of Nosferatu tanking if you're very careful, but usually I don't find it very useful. Expel I don't really find very useful. I don't remember if she has it at base, but I don't really find that a very good spell. But just the spell she has and the spell she gets on level up are super nice. Just huge lack of availability. Might as well join in Act 4. Wait, doesn't she? Yeah, she joins in Act 4. And not very good at that. But the utility she has when she's around is pretty good. I want to put her like in the top of D tier for that. Like I think she's worse than Bowie overall, because Bowie and May, they joined so early, and Claire too. And Atlas I think is a step above her. He gets pretty good at the end of Act 3, I want to say. We recently get him Hunter's Volley, but maybe like early Act 4. I don't think she's as good at those units, but her utility is super nice, and when they're both around, I would say Tatiana usually outperforms like these units, and maybe even like Celica and stuff. Last but not least, we have Clive. I think I tiered him recently on the Overlooked Cavalier tier list, so not too much to add to that entry, but I still think Clive gets like the bad end of the stick from ratings a lot of the time. I think people just like, he's not that good in his like effectively joining chapter. In chapter 1E, I guess is what we'll call it, like the last one of Act 1. He's unpromoted. Floors make him look like he has really bad accuracy, which is something that happens to everyone besides the mage in that chapter. So I don't think it's fair to weigh that against him. But his bases are fairly solid, and once he promotes into Paladin after like 1 level, he becomes one of your better units for sure. And I gave him 1 speed fountain to make him double Cavaliers, 1, and he just doubled them at base level. So I think his AS is not a big issue. Rider's Bane makes him super good against those Cavaliers, and he is tanky enough to take him on as well. I don't think you have any other unit that can really do what he does. Like Lucas can fight Cavaliers as well, but I don't think he one-shots. I think he can, like, once he becomes like a Baron, he can one-shot Cavaliers, but not while he's still a Knight. And he doubles, like my bro here, he just doubles these. There are like guys he can double, like promoted Paladins and like Fernand and stuff. He's not gonna like kill Barku in 1 hit, but most of the Scrub Cavaliers he can handle and take him out of your hair real quick. And I'm pretty sure I also, like, I got Armor Crush on him, which has also been like situationally useful. When he's using like a Forked Steel Lance, just do like a decent chunk of damage to Barons, to where the point where like a mage can finish them off. Stuff like that is just useful. Having more mobility for the most part is nice. Alm doesn't really have to deal with swamps very much. Just a couple forests here and there, but you can ride around them just fine generally. And it's not like the rest of your army is like getting ahead of you. You kind of need to hunt in packs anyway, in Echoes. So I think generally Clive's flaws get like a little bit overhyped almost. Like, sure, he's not great against witches, but I find that on player phase he can dispose of them with Armor Crush. So he can kill one, which is generally what most of the units are doing anyway. And if you manipulate the RI quickly, then they're not even going to go for Clive. But it sucks when they do, I will admit that. I think it gets 2 shot or 3 shot by most of them. But having 3 of them go for Clive, I think can always be called like the player's fault, rather than the you know, the game design's fault. So Clive, I think it's fair to put him at least in like B+. I think that's like the least we can do for him. And honestly, at this point in the game, I find him more useful than Lucas. But I do remember Lucas being like super clutch early on. So for now, we'll put him like around here somewhere. It's kind of tough. I haven't used Dean this playthrough. I do think he's better than Matilda because of availability to lead and more bulk. Cliff is of course very dependent on what he promotes into. Right now for me he's a bow knight, so I'm kind of biased in favor of him. This is not a bow knight, but also takes a while to like, get going. Early on these 2 units were not as good as Clive was, for sure. He's not very available, she's not very available, he has more availability. I think at the very least he belongs here, and I think he could honestly be higher. I'm trying to remain unbiased here. I like Clive a lot. Last but not least, we have some 3 houses units. Let me see who submitted these real quick. So the 3 houses, boys and girls. Blue Caterade submitted Ferdinand von Eyre and Bernadetta. Thornless Rose submitted Flame. Huntaz submitted Catherine. And Burby Masta submitted Mercedes. So thank you very much. I think I've read out all the names. I forgot someone last time and I feel really bad about it. I'm really sorry. But yeah, those are the units we're rating today from 3 houses. Ferdinand, of course, besides the fact that he introduces himself every single time you select him, probably most well known for having Swift Strikes available, which means he's kind of not forced, but like railroaded into some like lance using classes like Paladin and Wyvern Rider / Wyvern Lord. Those are, I think, the classes you should go for generally, and those are the classes I'm going to rate him based on. I don't think he should be anything else. I know a lot of people put a lot of stock into him using Sword of Void to advantage, like making him a dancer, but then you reclass him in like Swordmaster or Paladin or I don't know, some kind of sword using class. You can't use Falcon Knight, so I know what you're going to make. I guess Wyvern Lord is something people do a lot because Flyers, Flyers like Wyvern Lord get an extra avoid +10 skill for free, and they kind of make him like a dodge tank. They go like, alright, I'm going to use Sword Avoid from Dancer class, Sword Avoid +20, 10 Avoid from Flyer class, like 15 Avoid I think from Alert Stance Plus, I think. Actually I think it's 30, and Sword Prowess 5 and stuff like that, and just make him like a dodge tank, which you can do, and it will generally often make enemies have 0 hit on him, but I find it kind of ruins his offense a little bit, and I think most of the time he's most effective just like a player phase assassin that uses Swift Strikes to kill enemies. You can use like certain effective lances like the Spear of Azal, or really any lance you want like a Horse Slayer, or anything you want really to just kill enemies quickly like that. I think Swift Strikes is his best purpose. He does have a good personal skill for that dodge tank build though. Avoid like +15 I believe when he's at full HP is pretty nasty. Of course it does break when he levels up HP, so you kind of be wary of that. Generally I'm a big fan of Swift Strikes, just killing everything like that. This kind of hampers enemy phase, but I don't think his enemy phase is ever going to be good anyway, and 3 houses is a very player-phased game. So I think it's fair to have Ferdinand based on that. I think Ferdinand belongs with the rest of the squad here in B, no, A-, I guess is where they're at right now. I don't think we have Sylvain in there yet. I want to say he's like around here somewhere. I do think he's a little bit overrated. I like Tempest Lance early on, but overall I think his early game is not super impressive on Ferdinand von Eyre. I think he has some issues based on that. I think Leone is overall, for example, a more competent unit. I think he's okay in this spot. I could put him below Petra as well. But both, like all these they're kind of same-ish in a way. They both go like Wyvern pretty reasonably quickly. I do like the fact that he has no Banes. That's pretty nice considering. I think he's just like good at swords, lances, axes, stuff like that. Pretty nice to have. I like Ferdinand von Eyre. He's neat, but he's not a perfect unit. This is what I mean when I say 3 houses units are so samey. Like, look at them just chilling all in this tier. Next we have Bernadetta, the star of one of my more recent waifu episodes, and one of my favorites, honestly. It was really well edited, and God, Bernie is so much fun to use. I cannot get over like how, like I talked about Odin and how I did a huge 180 on him, but Bernie is also a unit I just like much more. As a result, I also like the character a lot more, even though it's still kind of cringy. But I love using Vengeance to my advantage, and it's good. I don't even think it's just a meme. It's not just favoritism, it's just, it makes playing the game faster and easier. She helps me more than she hurts me, by far. The quick rundown is basically, If you don't have her already from the start, recruit Bernie ASAP. Train her lances up a lot so she can learn Vengeance at, I believe it's C+. Get her to low HP. Doesn't even have to be 1 HP. It can be like 10 HP if you want. Give her a couple different lances like Training Lance, Steel Lance, maybe Forge one if you want to. Give her Lance of Ruin when you get it. And go nuts, go kill stuff. She's very good at killing stuff. Like, you don't have to be at low HP or like 0 HP or 1 HP. 0 HP is kind of overkill. 1 HP is not what you need. You need like 10 HP maybe, and then you just kill everything with Vengeance. It's so good. It just adds 1 damage for every damage you've taken. So if you've taken 20 damage, you have a combat art that does 20 extra damage. This is stronger than Dimitri and Edugard and Byleth and all these other strong units you have early on. It's sometimes Catherine isn't one-running things early game. Bernie kills everything in 1 hit. Of course, if she misses, she kind of dies. So you do want to stack like hit supports or you know, use a Training Lance when you can, which still works. Insanely strong. And even if you can't Vengeance for a turn, if you can't do it safely, if the accuracy is too low or there's too many enemies around, you can still Curved Shot. Like if she's an archer, you have like 4 range with Curved Shot. And later on you even get Deadeye, which has even more range. You can still use it accurately because hit plus 20 is OP. And again, support stacking is very easy when you have this much range. Persecution Complex, insane personal skill. Yo, someone's calling me. Hold on. Yeah, alright, Persecution Complex is a really good skill. It's super easy to activate, but you get +5 attack for basically free. It's probably the best personal skill in the game, and it just adds to the damage that Vengeance does, and that's already quite a lot. There's no unit I enjoy using more than Burn Deadeye in the 3 houses. Does that make her the best unit in the game? No, probably not. I saw Rengar put her in S tier. That is very high. I do have some issues with Bernie. Part 2 and some Part 1 maps I find are less useful than other times because chip damage is less valuable when the enemy density gets really high, just kind of like with the ninjas in Conquest. Of course, that's before I figured out ninjas could 1-round KO anyway, but you get the point, right? If there's high enemy density, then having a unit that cannot do enemy phase at all is kind of scary. And having a unit that doesn't really, like, she doesn't really one-shot enemies with bows, I find most of the time. But it's still pretty useful when you're like fighting enemies in small clusters, or if you're trying to kill a boss. Although, I will say most of the boss kills in Part 2 I think are possible without Bernie. You don't really need the Vengeance setup to kill most bosses. Swift Strikes or something like that tends to be sufficient. But it can still work. You can do some kind of setup where she like moves somewhere, gets countered by an enemy, and then get danced. Of course, you want to use something like Blessing or a Guardian Adjutant to save her from death if necessary. That kind of goes without saying at this point. I still think Bernie is an A+ unit. I still think she's up there with Shamir and Lysithea. I would still place her somewhere around here. I think she's still super solid. I just don't think... I could see her like arguing her... Let's move up a little bit, I guess. I could see her maybe comparing to Claude in some ways, but Claude has some other really good advantages that I like. So I'm not sure if she's ready to compare to Claude just yet, but I do think she's much better than these units. And it's funny for me to see like these units, by the way. My cursor disappeared for a second. It is pretty funny to me to see people like trying to bend themselves into a corner, trying to deny it. It's pretty funny. People trying to put in like lower D or C just because Vengeance is a gimmick, or it's tough to set up, or Archer with low strength growth, haha, Ignatz and Ashe are better. Bro, they're not. They're not. Next up is Flame. One of the funniest units I've ever used in 3 houses because she goes like rah every time she uses rescue on someone or uses any kind of healing staff or gambit or something like that. It's kind of like I Live, but it's with Flame instead. I think Flame is an adorable person. I see a lot of people hate on her as a unit, and right now I'm in the process of commentating a 3 houses Blue Lions Maddening Mode low turn count playthrough, in case you didn't see it. And I gotta say, Flame pops up an awful lot of amounts for low turn count clears, just because rescue is such a nice low effort but high return mobility use. Like, it's kind of like Smite. It's not going to move you like a whole lot of tiles, but it's pretty flexible. You can manipulate it a little bit with you know, rescue boosting, putting units next to the rescuer so that the rescuer gets boosted further than they otherwise would be. And it's actually pretty nice. And she can also be a good adjutant to Byleth to boost his damage output, or to Setheth, both of those, because Flame has enough flying rank, I believe, to reclass the Pegasus Knight right away, and then you can make an adjutant to like a Wyvern Rider like Byleth or like Setheth. You just kind of kill units off that way. And that's pretty nice. But of course, if she's an adjutant, she's not really doing much other than being an attack support. She's kind of like a Fate's backpack. There's not a whole lot of credit for there. But I'm just saying there's pretty good uses for Flame without training her. I trained her only once. It was on a Blue Lions New Game Plus run on hard mode. My second playthrough ever. So far from efficient play. And I don't really have a lot of experience with Flame as a unit. I know she got some like good spells. I'm sad she didn't get Physic, but at least she got Fortify, which can be alright. I'm not a super big fan of Fortify, as I'll talk about a little more in Mercedes' entry. I generally think targeted healing is better, and generally I don't think healing is super useful for efficient clears, but for casual runs it can be nice, I suppose. Her spell list I remember being alright, but not like super fantastic. I think she got Excalibur, which is generally all you want for offensive spells. But I think most of the time nowadays you mostly just use Flame for free rescuing, which I think is alright, but I wouldn't put it very high. I'd say she's like Dorothea, Lawrence, Aloise level maybe. I could put her around here. Of course she takes a bit of an availability penalty, but I still think she's more useful than Lawrence is, for example. I could also see Lawrence going down a bit, but I know he has his moments. I think Lawrence was rated very early in the big tier list. Next up is Catherine. Another one of the Three Houses waifu videos that I've done was about Catherine. I'm replaying Three Houses right now. I'm playing some... let's see, what am I doing anyway? I think I'm just playing... Alright, I was playing... I've played some Gold Deer Manning where I recruited her. And I've been doing some... I've been trying to do an Edelgard solo for a little bit. I might show some footage of that as well. And of course Catherine isn't very very relevant for that one. That's what I've just been doing. And I still really like Catherine for part 1. I kind of, after doing the waifu video, I actually kind of got down on Catherine because she was very disappointing in part 2. But of course my skill build wasn't exactly optimal, and I didn't really try very hard to get a good one because I figured most of her utility is part 1. But I think in part 2 I might one day give her another go and try to make her go Wyvern Lord, because the part that was most underwhelming about her was the ability to KO things. But I think even if she got like the strength to KO things, I still wouldn't be a huge fan of her in part 2. But in part 1, there is no better character for a while. Once she recruited in chapter 5, she one-rounds everything. She has a great personal skill for that time where she takes 5 less damage from both magical and physical enemies just through not having a battalion. And then whenever you want, you can switch to having a battalion, treating her authority, etc. But she has a base D authority rank, so she's pretty good on like getting good at battalions to begin with. And without a battalion, she can function just fine. And just having a swords at base lets her use like any sword you want, like Killing Edge, Silver Sword Plus, the Steel Sword Plus you get very early on. I think there's the Sword of Zoltan or the Sword of Zoralta. One of those two, you get it from like a Felix Dimitri A support. All that stuff, she can use it to one on everything. Armor Slayer you get in chapter 5. Anything you want really. And she just murders everything in chapter 5 and for quite a while after. Like I think even in late part 1, like chapter 11, chapter 12, she'll have the speed and attack to kill everything necessary. Of course, you can get some other out-of-house recruits, like the Blue Lions LTC recruits, I think, Leonie and Hilda fairly late, and they will have similar bases to her, is one thing I learned when commentating that. So at some point, Catherine will no longer be your best unit, but when she starts out, she will be your best unit by far. Like, sure, Bernie might do more damage, but Catherine does not have to be at 1 HP, so she can be good on both player phase, enemy phase, and still kill like 90% of the enemies, and super good. For like, I would recommend trying out Wyvern Lord if you want to use Catherine for part 2 for a little bit. I did Falcon Knight. I got like hit plus 20, Death Blow, and Darting Blow. She still wasn't super good as a Falcon Knight, but that was one playthrough on Maddening with like not the most optimal class. I would try out Wyvern Lord if I were you. She could probably qualify for it in the long term. You just gotta set her goals to like flying and access or lances depending on what she needs for, and occasionally give her some tutoring. I think she can make it. You only need like sea lances, and you want to train her on lances anyway for Pegasus Knight rank. So yeah, Catherine could be okay in part 1 or in part 2, and in part 1 she's godly. So I would at least put her in like the 8. I don't think she's 8+. I think she's like A-. I would say Seth overall is better. I think he's more dominant through the course of 3 houses. Like his dominance in part 2 I think is bigger. Although he does lose availability to her, so maybe she's like on par with him. I don't know, this A tier is looking weird right now. I'm not a big fan of having every unit in single tier, but again, 3 houses units feel so samey. Considering how good out of house Hilda is, maybe she should be moving up. I'll put her like similar to Petra now, because her final stats are kind of similar to Petra. But yeah, there we go. That's Catherine for you. Last we have Mercedes, kind of a joke submission by Kirby, because we were in the Three Houses channel chilling on the server, and there's one person there who like really hates Mercedes and would always rant about how annoyingly bad she is. And I do think Mercedes is quite overrated in Three Houses. So a lot of people like her as the best healer. Now, as I said, I don't think healing is very useful in Three Houses to begin with. It is nice early on, but I think people forget that Mercedes is not actually the best healer early on. Live to Serve is a very bad skill, I think, especially in Manning, where she gets one-rounded, so her healing herself when she heals other people is not useful at all. I would much rather have, I mean, to be fair, like, most of the personal skills are kind of garbo. Marianne's personal skill was not useful at all either, and Leonhardt's personal skill is also pretty bad. So I just think that's like a non-factor in this, basically. I think the other problem with Mercedes is her faith rank is lower. I believe she starts with like a whole rank lower than the other healers. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's like a whole rank lower, so she gets Physic several chapters later, and that sucks, because Physic is a really useful and good spell, and it's what make like Dorothea and Linhardt and Marianne like super useful early on in part 1. It's not just the range healing, although that is very nice, but it's also like extra heal uses in a part where you don't really have very much, and she learns it later because reasons. And then she doesn't really have a whole lot of other things going for her. The other thing I kind of don't like about Mercedes is Fortify, which sounds dumb. You know, why would you not like a unit that heals your other units? And I understand the logic behind liking Fortify, because in other games, especially like the GBA games, Fortify is like super exclusive high rank staff that you have a very limited amount of. So getting that on a unit basically unlimited, because it repairs itself between chapters like all spells do. It seems very good, but Fortify in this game has such low range. It has worse range than Physic, and that means you're not going to reach a whole lot of people with it. And in addition, but this is a smaller fall something. I forgot English. The other problem I have with Fortify is it might heal someone like Bernadetta that's relying on being low HP. There's a lot of like units that function on enemy phase, mostly through like Wrath Vantage shenanigans, that will just get healed. The best combo is still like Dimitri's like Battalion Wrath, Battalion Vantage combo, so it doesn't apply for most units, it mostly just applies to Bernadetta. So it's like a small inconvenience, but it just like, I just don't think mass healing is like super important to have in Three Houses, and it can potentially backfire, but that's not a big deal. The big problem I have with Mercedes is just Fortify isn't as useful as most people think it is. Live to Serve is completely useless, and she gets Physic later than other healers. I still think healing is nice early on. I just don't think there's much of a purpose for Mercedes. I never found her offense to be very good. It's not that like Marianne is particularly offensively good, or like Dorothea, of course, but Mercedes herself doesn't really do it like much better. She gets like Bolganon as her most powerful spell, I think. She's not doubling on Manning, but like not anywhere close. She could probably double like Armor Knights and stuff. So I would put her like in the C tier somewhere, honestly. I don't think she's that good. And this will be surprising to a lot of people, I think. But yeah, I just don't think she's that great. I think Marianne's like recent spell with like Thoron, for example, is better. And I also think like Linhardt's Warp, for example, is much better than what Mercedes has to offer. That's the other thing that she doesn't have is Warp, but obviously not everyone has Warp. Marianne doesn't have Warp either. I could see Marianne moving down to B+, maybe. Linhardt's Warp is significantly... Yeah, I'm gonna do that, actually. Thoron is nice, but it's not like super great. Yeah. I'm a little happier with that. Yeah. Alright, so I can't show the whole thing that I've done for today because it hasn't been merged yet, and you can't just merge the code for this tier list like you might hope you could. So instead, I'll just show the Three Houses one briefly. And this is the Echoes one we've done. Is it completely in view? I guess not. Let me just move it up and down a little bit so you can see. This is the Echoes one that we've done. And this one we haven't really changed very much. We put Ryoma in S, that's really all you need to know. We have Ryoma as S tier, let's go. We have Conquest right now, and we have Awakening right now. The absolute state of Awakening tier lists. Oh, this works? This works. Okay, there we go. Here we go. Scrolling works again. And then we have FE12, which hasn't really changed, I think. Yeah, we started with Awakening today. So that's the changes that we've done today. At some point, I will merge these back into one giant tier list. I might take out the ordering within tiers for like different games and just have like, for example, the B+ tier might start with like the FE3 units and the FE4 units and the FE5 ones, etc., to still make it a bit easier to parse. Because I feel like I said, I feel like a lot of people just compare units from the same game anyway to figure out, you know, what's wrong with the tier list. And I think it's more important to get the units right in from the same game compared to each other, and then we can worry about cross-game comparisons. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the new format. I'm still experimenting with it. Might need to change some things in my OBS for it. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for everyone for supporting me. It really means a lot. And I will see you next time. And I'm going to open the thread for a new batch soon. So pay attention. Deadline will probably be somewhere in early October, so that both people who pledged in September and people who joined in October will be able to submit characters. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.